Welcome to Policy on Demand. I am Noha Nayeri.
And I'm Scott McCandless. It is the week of April 17th, and this is your Monday briefing. Congress returns this week from its spring recess and essentially will be working from now until the Memorial Day holiday. Looking ahead, committee hearings on fiscal year 2024 appropriations will continue, and Congress will need to address the federal debt limit in coming weeks. But for this week, the Senate Finance Committee will hold an April 19th hearing with new IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel on the President's FY24 IRS budget proposal and the IRS's 2023 filing season. The Senate Budget Committee will hold an April 18th hearing on the cost of tax avoidance, and the House Ways and Means Committee will be very busy with an April 19th hearing on certain green corporate energy tax incentives, and the Trade Subcommittee holding an April 18th hearing on Chinese trade and investment. The full committee will then hold another field hearing, this time in Peachtree, Georgia, on Friday, April 21st, on the state of the U.S. economy. Noha?
As Scott just mentioned, Congress is returning from a 2-week recess. Joining us today to talk about Congress's priorities is Chairman Dave Kemp. Chairman Kemp, welcome.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you both.
So, Chairman Kemp, obviously the federal debt limit is a huge priority issue right now, and we do understand that the House Republican leaders will introduce a federal debt limit bill. How do you think in this current political environment, how difficult do you think it will be to secure a 218 Republican votes for a bill that will include spending cuts as well as raising the debt limit?
Well, Noha, for the past couple of weeks, as you've noted, Congress has been out of session, but they've been sort of having discussions behind the scenes on how best to move their debt limit proposal forward. And it will be incredibly challenging to get to 218 because it's been very challenging for Republicans to raise the debt limit because they feel spending has gone too high and they'd like to see proposals to try to limit future spending. So it looks as if they're kind of coalescing around a 1-year extension of the debt limit with some spending reductions or at least flat funding and maybe 2022 year levels. That's really yet to be determined. But that will also require, I think, some policy riders for them in order to get there. And what they're trying to do is find things that their members can come behind and support. And so they'll have some ideas like rescinding the COVID funding that has been unspent. You'll see other proposals like maybe to limit the president's ability to forgive student loans. You might want to see, they might see a proposal on work requirements in social programs. So these are some of the items that they may need to attach to a debt limit proposal in order to get enough support among Republicans in the House in order to move something forward. And it does appear as though the administration will not engage with Republicans on debt limit issue until they've said until they have a budget, but until they can get 218 members, which is a majority in the House, to get behind something. So we're going to see some activity this week potentially with Speaker McCarthy speaking in New York in front of the stock exchange in order to try to build his case for engaging with the president on the debt limit and the critical nature of the debt limit. We may even see coming forward further detail on when do extraordinary measures that the Treasury Department administration are using to maintain federal solvency. We'll see maybe potential some more detail on that coming in the next week or a couple of weeks. So those are some things that could impact this discussion on the debt limit, but there's no way to underscore it. It's going to be a very challenging thing for the Republicans to get behind.
And Chairman Kemp, on Wednesday, the Senate Finance Committee will be holding hearing on the President's FY24 budget for the IRS. The hearing closely follows the recent release of the IRS strategic plan for spending the almost $80 billion from the Inflation Reduction Act. What do you think we might expect to learn from this hearing?
Well, I think there's been a general consensus that this new proposal on how the IRS would spend the inflation reduction money they received, the almost $80 billion, that it didn't really have enough detail. And I think you'll see a lot of discussion about how many employees will that allow the IRS to hire and what are those employees going to do? I think you'll also see discussion potentially along the lines of how will the IRS administer some of the green energy subsidies? And will they, in fact, have enough funding in their annual appropriations, separate and apart from this Inflation Reduction Act money, to implement some of the green energy subsidies? And it does appear as if about 10% of the Inflation Reduction money will go to new technology, and about 90% will go to enforcement. So who is actually that enforcement going to impact, and what are the metrics going to be behind determining that enforcement? There was a recent study that showed that some of the IRS's enforcement action may have sort of a racial bias attached to it. So that's going to be something that I think you're going to see members wanting to discuss. So I think all in all, more detail on the IRS proposal on how to spend the money, and more detail on how some of these green energy subsidies will be implemented.
So, Chairman Kemp, Wednesday seems to be a very busy day. The House Ways and Means Committee will be holding a hearing on the green corporate tax incentives. What do you think we're going to learn from this hearing?
Well, Noha, the hearing is entitled How the U.S. Tax Code is Subsidizing Green Corporate Handouts. So I think the focus will be who benefits from these green energy subsidies. Will it be U.S. companies? Will it be the wealthy? Will it be our foreign competitors? We've also seen a study that shows that these green energy subsidies may be as much as 3 times more expensive than what the Congressional Budget Office indicated. So I think you'll see some skepticism on the part of the majority about the effectiveness of these green energy subsidies. There are some, of course, that do have bipartisan support. So I think the focus of the hearing will be really, are these a legitimate use of taxpayer dollars, and how effective will they actually be?
Great. Chairman Kemp, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out the latest Week in Review with Rohit Kumar and a special episode on the IRS Strategic Operating Plan included in the description of this episode. Also, stay tuned for this Friday's Week in Review.
And to our audience, as always, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.